name's Tom Goodney. I'm the superintendent at the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio. This is my 16th year at the ESC. About 7.5 of those were as our deputy superintendent. I've been our superintendent since 2013. We work very closely with all of the districts in the region in a whole host of ways. We've been an associate member of MORPC. I've enjoyed that affiliation with all of you very much. I want to pivot now to my colleagues, and I'm going to call on them by their name and just ask them to briefly introduce themselves, the district they're with, maybe how long they've been there, and we'll just move through all 4 of them, and then I'm going to jump right into some questions and call on them and just let them speak to you. If at any time, I think Kirsten has this set up for audience Q&A at the end, and Kirsten, if that's the way that you want this to flow, that's fine. But if somebody does have the need for a follow-up, perhaps Kirsten or her colleagues could be monitoring the chat function, and you could chime in and let me know that there's a question from the group. So Diane Allen from Marysville.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Allen. I'm the superintendent of Marysville Schools. I'm just starting my 10th year in the school district, which seems amazing, really. So happy to be here this morning.
Thanks, Diane. Philip Wagner.
Philip Wagner, Licking Heights Schools. We're about 16 miles east of Columbus. I start my 11th year in the school district as superintendent in August. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Philip. Melvin Brown.
I don't think he's on yet, Tom.
Okay, we'll go to John Stanford.
I don't think you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you, John.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm having a little bit of technology issues this morning. Again, my name is John Stanford. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Columbus City Schools, and I've been with the district a total of about 15 years now in a variety of different roles.
Appreciate you all being with us this morning. Well, why don't we jump right in? I mean, one of the central topics that is centered in this discussion is impacts that new residential developments have on your district. Obviously around total student enrollment, but also perhaps how the state funding formula works for new students or doesn't work, as the case may be, as well as the impact that that has on facilities. And I want to turn to Philip Wagner on this question, and then Diane or John can feel free to offer their perspectives. Philip, what impacts are the new residential developments having in Licking Heights? Are you having regular conversations with your civic leaders and partners about those planned and built out developments? And generally, what role do you play, or does your board play, in helping to advise that development process before development occurs?
All good questions. Thank you. For our school district, we make up about 7 communities, and we don't have any community that's solely within our boundaries, so we share with other school districts. The 2 main cities in our school district boundaries, again, we share Pascagoula with the Southwest Licking Schools, and we also share New Albany, the city of New Albany, with the New Albany schools. But we have regular conversations with many of our municipalities, but not as consistent. And one of the things that is important is if we can plan together for student enrollment changes and growth. As Dr. Goodney said, this, obviously there's not much compression in Central Ohio. You see it in other parts of the state, but not here because we're so fast growing. Within public schools, you may be aware, but there's a state organization called the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, and many of us have worked with the state agency They originally started years and years ago out of the tobacco settlement. They received some monies to build public buildings, and that money has since been exhausted, but there's still additional monies there that are provided by the state government. And when you work with this the OFCC, the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, they help you put together a plan. So we have a strategic growth plan for our school district. And then when you work with this agency group, they look at enrollment projections. They help you both, where you've been and into the future. That's very important as we, move forward with our school district. When we have new developments, sometimes that are unexpected, whether that's apartments or housing developments, that throws off the numbers a bit. So what we end up with is, as we're working with this OFCC, we have enrollment projections, and that helps us look at growth and how we're going to manage our facilities. For example, my school district, we were supposed to be about 4,950 in terms of student enrollment this year. We're closer to about 4,800, which is where we ended the previous year. That's all COVID related because our growth flattened this year. We're about a zero-sum game with COVID. But in August of 20, we opened a brand new high school that is built with a core capacity of 1,800. So everything is sized to 1,800, but it has a current capacity of 1,500. And then we have the ability to add a wing on that building for another 300 students. And when we work with the OFCC, we have that all planned, and we expect that to occur in 2026. And that will be contingent upon growth in the area. Equally, we are looking forward into the future, and we know we're going to need an elementary school in 2024, so we're already working on that through the process. So all that comes together at strategic, but it's so important, I would say, that we end up talking and that we can work collaboratively with community members. Within the city of Pataskala, for example, in their ordinance, they have a requirement that developers meet with the school district. I could take no credit for that ordinance because it's been in existence longer than I've been here, but we've fostered that relationship. So we actually work with developers along the way, and it helps us with our strategic planning in terms of growth and when we either have to add new buildings or if we have to add on to a building, if that's possible. We don't have that relationship with all our municipalities to the same degree. I think it's something that we all desire so that we can work collaboratively because we want to provide the best schools possible, and we understand what that does for the area in terms of not only great living opportunities, but work and people being able to live near their employer. Dr. Goodney brought up the issue about school funding. I'll just do a high-level view on this, but the state of Ohio is a broken school funding model. It really penalizes school districts that are fast-growing, so that's almost all your school districts in Central Ohio. And I've been asked the question before, don't we get enough money from developments to pay for students? We've run the analytics, it's about a year old now for us, and our average housing our average house is about $250,000 to $275,000 in my school district. We do have some that are being built now in the high 300s, low 400,000 range. But for us to be able to wash costs for a student, we have to have a house over $700,000 in value. So we don't have that, so then we rely on state funding. So it's important as we go through this process that we make sure we work with developers so that we can have adequate facilities and, that because the funding structure is not there, obviously. One other thing I'll just try to jump in here or insert into the conversation is development and the infrastructure is important. When we built our new high school, we partnered with Water and Sewer District. It was in Columbus. We partnered with them. We actually ended up serving as the developer for water and sewer on our property. And it actually has a benefit for our school district, but it also provides a benefit to the area to the point where there'll be no pump station needed for additional sewer, and it's miles down the road, and it lets them extend their footprint. So we can be highly creative, I guess is the point, and the same thing with water. We can be highly creative in how we not only plan for the future and how we service the school district needs, but also to serve the community needs. Because again, we serve as the developer for water and sewer in our project that will expand these services short and long term. And we have an opportunity. We're going to turn that project over to the water and sewer district, and then in exchange we have tap fees relief, but they also have a future revenue stream with tap fees that are forthcoming as the area develops. Dr. Gooden, is there anything else that you'd like me to touch on as try to get a high level overview here? It's obviously complicated.
No, I think that's a great foundation centered around this question. There'll be some other questions, Phil, that you might be able to provide some other local context for. Diane, generally the same question to you. Impacts on new residential developments and what that's having on your district in Marysville and Greater Union County. Are you having regular conversations with your planning commission and officials? Are the schools able to give the necessary input into the development process before those developments occur?
So I would say we have been having some conversations with the county and chamber and city. We do not have the opportunity and that Licking Heights has in sitting at the table with development. We did have our very first developer reach out to us about a week ago to start that conversation for a potential new community. I think the important thing to understand, I think Todd, our treasurer, and I have this conversation quite often. And I think Phil kind of alluded to the broken model of funding. Even if that model is changed, a lot of the students we're talking about with high mobility rates actually cost exponentially larger amount to educate than we even would receive on those funding dollars. So I think that understanding all those nuances, and certainly school funding is probably its own, 10-hour session alone, but as we continue to grow, as we're having those conversations, the long-term effects, it's not as much the new building that we're concerned about that might have to go in, but it's those long-term impacts on your forecast associated with new staff and utilities and transportation and all those things that continue to add to your budget over that period of time. So, we also would encourage that collaboration. I think we've been able to solve a lot of problems in communities when school districts are brought to the table. So I think that's very important in moving forward as well.
Appreciate that. John, generally the same question. I know it's a big topic in Columbus and has been for many years, but can you talk just sort of universally about developments in the city and the jurisdiction of the school district and the ongoing conversations that you're having with the city and the ability to be a part of those discussions before those developments are approved?
So thank you, and you're absolutely right. This has been a very hot topic in the city of Columbus and for Columbus City Schools. Probably going on 20 years now. And the bottom line is that we have had off and on relationships with the city when it comes to development. It is much better with development of commercial property and with industrial property than it is with residential. I know folks know that we have a lot of residential condos and apartments that are popping up all over downtown, and we're not a part of a lot of those conversations. And so the interesting thing about our development in Columbus City Schools, it was interesting hearing Superintendent Wagner talk about development in his district, because a lot of the development in our district, we have not seen our student enrollment increase with the development. A lot of the development in our district, especially around residential development, has been with younger individuals especially the downtown development that has gone on. Those are either retired individuals or young individuals who don't have kids yet. And so a lot of the development that we have seen in the city of Columbus, has not resulted in a dramatic increase in our student enrollment as a school district. And so, most recently, the conversations and the partnerships with the city has been much better, and we're having much better productive conversations with them when it comes to development. And we certainly are definitely open to even more conversation and even more involvement when it comes to development, and really getting rid of the stigma that the school district is a barrier to development and doesn't want to see development occur. I mean, that's a stigma I think that a lot of school districts around the state are labeled as, and it's really not true. We just want to make sure that we're at the table and make sure that our issues and concerns are a part of the conversation on the front end, as opposed to us being brought in on the back end and having to catch up to the conversation at that point in time.
Appreciate that, John. So let's pivot for a second to the issue that I brought up earlier around mobility. Without putting up a slide with a district by district breakdown of mobility, each of my colleagues on this call and all my colleagues has a general handle on what that student mobility rate is in their district. So the presumption with this question is that student turnover is comparatively high in this region as compared to other like type metropolitan areas across the country. I think that's been widely discussed and even reported on locally over the past several years. And then with that is this notion that puts stress not only on the families, but also on the school districts, right down to the individual teachers, to adapt to that mobility. I'm curious, and I'll start with John. What would you say? What do you and your colleagues in Columbus City Schools say are the primary reasons for high student turnover rate, student mobility rates? And do you have a sense of how many of your students are facing housing instability issues? Is that even anything that you attempt to track in the district?
So definitely mobility is an issue in Columbus City Schools and has been an issue for a number of years. And I think, the research bears out what we're experiencing here in Columbus, that, that mobility is highly tied to socioeconomic status and, poverty. And so, and especially when it comes to housing, being a big driver, especially with our intra-district mobility. And so, we have parents who are, living in rental units, and they may get evicted or may get behind on the rent and have to move, and that may happen 2-3 times in one school year. And as you said, I mean, that can be just devastating for the student and the family, because the student now has to adapt to every move and meet new friends and get acclimated to a new school culture and get acclimated to a new teacher and new faculty and staff at that school every time that they move. And so, we do not track the housing issue. That is definitely something that is interesting to think about, and to see if we can somehow, develop something that would allow us to track that, because that is so very, very important. And it would definitely be a way to develop intervention strategies if we had better information along that regard, and being able to partner, with other public and private organizations, to try and address those issues. related to housing. But I think, at the core of it is the economics, and being able, people being able to have affordable housing, and having, jobs and income coming in that will allow them, to afford the housing, whether it's a house or whether it's a rental unit, that they will be able to, have stability in their lives. And I'll just say real quickly, in Columbus, we also have a huge homeless issue as well, which, the McKinney-Vento tries to, address some of the mobility by, allowing or requiring school districts to work with each other around transportation and keeping that child in their, original school. But, again, being homeless raises a whole another list of issues and concerns when it comes to, students. So.
Appreciate that perspective. Diane, is this an issue for you in Marysville as well?
Sure, mobility is becoming a bigger and bigger issue for us here in Marysville. And I know John just mentioned homelessness. Unique to Marysville is we don't have any opportunities at all for any kind of short-term homeless opportunities. We don't have a shelter here in our community. So students actually have to go to another county, or families do, to find an opportunity to receive support in that way. So it's traumatic enough to be removed from your own home, but then you're also being moved to another county and brought back. And so as I continue to think about the mobility factors, certainly it is our students of high poverty, our special ed students that fall in the category for us. And those are the kids that need us most as educators, right? When you talk about the foundation of what makes us work, it's relationships. And it's how well we know our families and we can wrap our arms around them as a community. And when we have these pieces of mobility, it just becomes another layer of struggle or obstacle for us to continue to connect. It seems, I'm sure everyone's experienced this, just as we're starting to know that family, then they're gone. And we're having a hard time connecting with the other building to say these supports worked. These are the things, these are the mentorships that we connected families with. So it's almost as if we're kind of taking the bottom out from under students and families when they each time they make that move. So I would say that's as my heart or my moral compass as an educator, that's what I struggle with the most, and they're the kids that need us the most. So I would say that's really what's impacting us on the mobility side now.
Appreciate that perspective, Diane. Philip, before I turn to you to kind of with the same general question of the impact of mobility on Licking Heights and perhaps what you all see as the reasons for some of that, I just wanted to share this anecdote. I know some on this call have heard me share this before, so my apologies, but it's usually my lead-in example when we start these conversations. But also for some of you who may be puzzled by this conversation, perhaps this just isn't anything that you're seeing in your jurisdiction or that you're aware of. Several years ago now, over Christmas break, one of our districts here in Franklin County, not any of the districts on this call, had 250 new students enroll over Christmas break. They had never seen anything even remotely close to that, even 30 to 40 new students enrolling at the end of one for fall semester going into the second. 250 brand new students coming into the district over Christmas break. And when I talked to the superintendent about how could that happen, what were the circumstances, he said it's quite simple. The apartment complex on Gender Road offered pay 1 month, get 3 months free. And so all of these families flooded into those apartments were able to cover the first month and knew they had stability for a while. And when I spoke to the superintendent that next late spring or summer, and actually confirmed it again with him the following fall at one of our first superintendent's meetings, virtually none of those students returned to that school district the following fall.
Wow.
We can all presume that, possibly there were other incentives and offers from perhaps the same apartment complex ownership. And so as I bring this up, and Kirsten and her colleagues, William and folks at Morpsey have heard me talk about this, is that there's a real big conversation to be had here with the folks that are developing, certainly from a housing strategy, but also from those who rent and cater to families that have school-age kids. That, to Diane's point earlier, we know that stability matters in terms of the academic and social emotional growth of students. Relationships over a long period of time matter. Our kids need to be known, and known well, by the educators and the support professionals that work with them. And if we have a sort of general housing apparatus that is literally encouraging, for the purposes of what John was talking about, economic survival, the ability to obtain housing at the lowest possible price point that they can afford, we are baking in a structural mobility that will continue until we understand the true impact that has on our kids. Philip, anything from a Licking Heights perspective on this before we move on to another question?
I think everything's been well covered. I will tell you that this year was a bit atypical because of COVID. So our turnover rate from the start of the school year to the end was just over 22%, which was exceptionally high. But to your point, about the importance of relationships, that's a foundational piece. So, and we have anecdotes as well too, where kids are in and out of the district multiple times in a year. The other thing I would say, I think everyone's covered the topic. The only other point I would add is sometimes there's cultural reasons for changes and we have a large Bhutanese Nepalese population, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I just know from talking with the elders, they have this is my layman's explanation of it, but they have what I call like a pay it forward model. So they have a family who establishes residents in the school district, and then they are supposed to put into a larger pool once they're successful, and that money is to help support housing and transportation for the next family and so on. So it's a communal or participatory model. But we often will find multiple generations living within a household, and then once they're stable, where they have their lifetime, then they'll move into another property. So we see that. Diane brought up a really good point, though, too, separate now to the topic jump, but about instability, food, and housing. John did as well. But we also are seeing people double up now, even if they don't declare homelessness. We're seeing multiple families, sometimes, or relationships, could be cousins, whatever, living in the household. That also puts a lot of stress on your infrastructure. We often don't think about that through these conversations, but it's not only your water and sewer, but it's your transportation patterns, it's your fire, any kind of first responders, because some of these, you have a 1,600-foot home, it's not built for 8 people, so many of whom are children or multi-generational. So otherwise, I think the topic's well covered, so thank you.
Great, appreciate that perspective. I want to pivot, and we can go back to any of these as you're thinking through answers to this next question and kind of connect the dots, so to speak. I want to pivot to a topic that I know is top of mind for Morpsey and many of our other regional partners and strategists, and that is the goal to attract and retain a highly skilled workforce. So think about this, colleagues, from 2 lenses. One, the responsibility you have to attract and retain a workforce for your school district to deliver the core academic services and operational services, but also in partnership with your communities. And you all, offer comprehensive high schools. Students are graduating and either going off to higher education or into some other form of workforce development. And I would imagine that it's top of mind for each of you to be looking to retain a lot of your local trained workforce to continue to live and contribute to your communities in the future, and to have kids and send them to your school districts. So having that as the sort of general context to the goal of, and perhaps challenges of, attracting and retaining workforce, is there any ways in which the current housing market is contributing to your ability to do that, inhibiting your ability to do that, perhaps from an affordability standpoint, accessibility, sheer numbers and availability? Do you even track how many of your staff actually reside in your school district? So I want to focus around that. Diane, I'll start with you from a Marysville perspective.
I really saw my answer headed one way, and then you shifted me another. So
Sorry.
Kind of throw it out there. First of all, we have about 60% of our staff live in the school district. Currently, I would say that's declined over time. I think kind of that idea of living in your community has changed a little bit. Also, we're very close to Dublin and Columbus, and I think there are some apartments and things for our young teachers that are a little more attractive than maybe what we offer here in our county. I would also say that you mentioned having access and affordability currently, and this is probably not unique to us, I'm sure. I think it was at one point in this spring, there were only 14 homes available to be purchased in Marysville. And so you could pretty much name your price and get that out of a house. The market has been such that the asking price is really not the price people are settling on. It's much more than that. So it's been an interesting, I would say since last summer into the spring, we've watched some homes that were really valued for a minimal amount. So for over 250,000 in some of the northern parts of our county, which has been interesting to watch. As far as workforce development, we have been working on that for quite some time, trying to create pathways in our high school, retain our own talent, internships in our development where students have been offered jobs right out of high school. So we're pretty proud of that side. We've also opened up our doors to community partners to help train adult workforce. So people who need skilled trade jobs are receiving training in many of our buildings in the evenings in order to help. But I have to be honest, even if every single student who entered our high school, graduated, trained, we couldn't fill the market that Honda has for demand of jobs with the retirement and the workforce retirement. So that's really been the impetus of our conversations about a housing strategy and retaining. I think that right now we're struggling to find some teachers. There's not a lot of people going into education comparatively. We're concerned about the trajectory with that. So if you couple on growing the development, you're kind of concerned that you'll be able to find the teacher workforce to cover our growth as well. So I think all of those things are starting to blend together and actualize in some different ways. So I think we have we're also concerned about the speed of which we are growing and our ability as a community to support the infrastructure. And I think Superintendent Wagner talked about that as well as we continue to add to our community. So I think that's a multi-layered response, but hopefully I hit on all the points you brought up.
No, excellent job. Thank you. Sorry to throw you a curveball there.
That's right. There were just lots of pieces.
Yeah. John, same question, but you can go at it whatever way that you want to. Challenges attracting and retaining a workforce for the district. Do you see the current housing market playing into that at all?
You know, I don't believe we've seen that in terms of attracting and retaining the talent in the district because we have such a wide variety of housing that's available in the city of Columbus. You know, if you're interested in renting, there's a wide variety of rental opportunities available. But I think on the ownership side, I think, we've got to, watch that more carefully in the city of Columbus, especially, coming out of this pandemic. Housing prices are starting to go up. And so if I'm a young teacher coming into the district, either fresh out of college or I've been in another district and I'm now, seeking other opportunities, but I want to own as opposed to renting, to build that sort of generational wealth. I'm not sure there are a whole lot of opportunities available, for somebody, especially if it's a single income household. And you're looking for, quality housing as well. And so, I think that is something that we're going to have to, watch as we move forward as a community here in the city. Like Diane, we are definitely, looking at developing career opportunities and career pathways, for our students that are tied, to Central Ohio's economy. Tom, I know you've been very active, in that part of the arena, working with Columbus State and, trying to, develop those pathways that are tied to the industries, here in Central Ohio. And I know all of the school districts in Central Ohio have been working with you, with Columbus State on that. And, and so I think, we can be very proud of the progress that we have made in that regard, with your leadership and with the leadership at Columbus State, because it is essential that we keep the talent here, here in Central Ohio, and that talent is allowed the opportunity to grow and develop in their career and not have to move out of the area, because that can be the foundation for our economy, for our community, and for the type of lifestyle that we want here in Central Ohio, if we're able to keep that talent and allow that talent to be generational, in Central Ohio. I guess the other thing that I'd like to piggyback on is saying that, the ability to attract talent is essential to every organization, and it's just as important in a school district when we are responsible for developing talent, right? We're in the business of developing talent and developing people. And so, having high quality talent that we can attract to our school districts and that we can have working with our students is absolutely critical and important.
Appreciate that, John. I also appreciate the reference to the Central Ohio Compact. I know that Dr. Harrison and I are talking about the future of the compact. Is this the time for a compact 2.0, sort of a reset on what are our goals and what are they anchored to? The old 60%, 65% Lumina Foundation goal, is that really the right thing that we should be chasing? Or do we have such a unique and differentiated regional economy right now that we have some other goals? And I think you all will be hearing more about that when we kind of come back from our summer travels and vacations. Philip, anything on this topic that is relevant within Licking Heights, the ability to recruit, retain a workforce for the district, and perhaps how the housing market within the district or nearby plays into that?
Yeah, I think that the topic's well covered. I guess I can underscore a couple of things. Superintendent Allen talked about workforce development and what's being done, and I agree with everything she said. And the work that's been done around Central Ohio as well too. But the thing primarily I would tell you that we've adopted, which a lot of districts have, is really looking at what they call the 3 E's. So obviously, when a child exits high school, that's our goal, is to get them ready for the next step in life. And the 3 E's really stand for employment, whether students are going directly in the workforce, whether they're enrolled, and that could be some form of secondary education afterwards, after high school. So that could be an associate's degree, culinary arts, matriculate to a 4-year college. And then we have enlisted as well too, so helping those from the military. So we just built a brand new high school, as I referenced earlier, and it's all built under that workforce development. I would just underscore also what Dr. Stanford said, because you've done a great job with Columbus State leading this initiative. I mean, I come from the first 20 years of my professional career. I worked in high wealth, high performing districts. And when I came here, I thought, 98% of the kids are going to go on to college. That's what we should be doing. We've really changed that now. And with our corporate parks that we have in the area, we're setting that percentage much lower, because we're finding there's such a dearth of staff. And Dr. Stanford said this too, about finding good staff. We always have to be building succession planning and who's the next person and how are we going to grow our organization, other organizations. So we work, like, for example, with the New Albany International Park there. We're actually in conversations about back mapping with one of the major tech companies there. When are you going to need certain positions? And they're looking out as far as 7 years, and we're trying to back map into our curriculum. So I think what you would find, and I think it really contributes to this whole piece, is fits right in with Morpsey, is that we can customize things so that we can have a workforce leaving high school. Working with the employer and looking ahead, we can make sure that children graduate with a very good, livable wage and package, and also have workforce credentials, could be licensing, whatever's needed, and go right into the workforce and not have to go into college. And in many respects, I think that can actually be better for some students, because they can find more gainful employment that way. But other than that, I don't have anything else to add.
Appreciate that. Melvin Brown from Reynoldsburg can't be with us this morning. He's in contract negotiations with one of their bargaining units. They must be getting close, because he can't break free and join the call. But I know that he wanted to talk about planning, and Philip just mentioned planning. And so for our Morpsey colleagues on the call, one of the goals of this forum was to really hear from school districts in terms of how does a community's planned growth, or plan for growth, include development, impact the school's planning for growth and development. And you could couch this in a lot of different ways with your answers. Expected student growth, perhaps the breadth and diversity of services that are going to have to be provided and planned for and paid for, anything in the educational realm, anything in the facility and operations realm, but just generally, when your Morpsey member constituent partners are planning for growth with other interests, developers, others, how does that impact your planning for any sort of according growth that goes with that? You want to take a stab at that one, Diane?
I'd say right now, a lot of times in our community, I think that we would say we're feeling very responsive as opposed to being a member of the table or a member of the conversation. Maybe we'll read in the local paper that a new development is coming out. So I think from our district, we would be interested in that co-planning or understanding, where kind of the ideas that are in the conversation that's taking place and having a voice in that conversation. I mean, it's clear that as things continue to grow, there are going to be impacts for our district. And I think that, you know, I was pretty impressed when I heard Superintendent Wagner talk about the opportunity to sit and talk with people from Pataskala and join in on that conversation. And I think, you know, right now, at times we miss those opportunities, or I feel like we may be missing some opportunities to come up with a plan that could help the school district grow in a strategic way and the communities grow in a strategic way that's unique to our county.
Sure. John, how's this playing out in Columbus?
So it is absolutely important for us to be on the table. You know, we've talked about that earlier this morning, and you know, one of the reasons why we believe it's really important is because that development that is going on can have an impact on the schools that may be in those areas as well, not just in terms of enrollment, but just in terms of the culture and the community impact of those developments in terms of traffic flow around the school. And so it's not only the enrollment impact, there are other impacts like financial impacts. There are also impacts that, you know, as I mentioned, in terms of the community and how that impacts the school that may already be there. But, you know, one of the things I also wanted to contribute is that by including us in those conversations, on the front end, you know, maybe there are opportunities to create economic development for those communities. You know, one of the things that we have, you know, talked a lot about in Columbus City Schools is that, you know, we have invested multi-millions of dollars in building facilities, you know, around the city. Wouldn't it have been great to use that investment as a Kickstarter for economic development in those communities by looking at the economic opportunities around those schools and having some sort of planned development that would not only, you know, benefit the community, but also would benefit the school itself, you know, by providing, you know, role models for younger kids if it's an elementary and middle school, or maybe even employment opportunities if it's a high school, you know, student. And so anytime that we can partner and have those type of conversations on the front end, it's a positive, you know, for us as a school district, but more importantly, a positive for our students and their families and the community as a whole.
Appreciate that, John. Philip, how does that play out in Licking Heights?
I don't really have a lot to add because much of it is you know, it's been covered, except I did say, I responded in the chat because of the question. Really, I think that that's the underscoring of today is the planning part of it. If we know, we can anticipate, and then you can make adjustments to that. Sometimes people think apartment complexes will help or dense housing like that. In our school district, our fourth largest taxpayer are apartments, but that doesn't keep pace either. So, you know, typically we do try to move more toward the residential housing, you know, single family homes if possible. But really, I think the topic's been well covered, except I would add that with economic development, as Dr. Stanford said, we really do try to promote that. It does two, if not three things for us. One is it helps protect or augment the residential tax base, so that helps. Then it puts less reliance on state taxes as well, and it can help you with your local taxes. Two, it provides jobs in the area, and that's all part of this. And I think that's so important that we have great jobs where people can live and work relatively close. And third, and this is more from a school district perspective, but anytime you develop a land, especially for me, agricultural to business or economic development opportunities, it also minimizes the residential base. So it kind of helps us control our growth a bit too. So I really see those are the three legs of what we look at with all this. But otherwise, I think the topic's been covered well.
Yeah. So I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to provide a thought here. What what's the one thing, the one perspective, the one thought that if we'd been talking about this a month ago or 2 months ago, that if I ever had an opportunity to be a part of a panel discussion with not just my local jurisdictional municipal colleagues, but a larger group of MORPC members in terms of providing a perspective from a school superintendent's chair leading a school system in a community. If I were able to meet with a group like that, what would be the one thing that you want to make sure that you articulate this morning that would be toward some of the models, some of the collaborative models, some of the partnership models that each of you has referenced this morning? You want to take a stab at that, Diane?
I love that you always start with me.
Ladies first.
I think that you said it. It's about being inclusive of school districts and collaborating with us. I think that there are a lot of examples of opportunities where we could develop something that would benefit the school and the community. And I think Dr. Stanford was talking along those lines as well. You know, as our community grows, we're going to need things like facilities where seniors can come and walk, and the school district's going to need those types of facilities as well. So I think having us on the forefront of those conversations could be impactful for kind of some co-developed ideas. I also laughed when we talked about having us at the table about traffic patterns. I think if you've ever been to elementary school at 9 a.m. where everyone's getting dropped off, you can understand the impact of having someone at the table from the school district to talk about the new development that's going to happen right next door, right? So I think it's imperative to invite us to the table so that we can be a part of the solution instead of a perceived part of the problem, maybe.
Any way to build on that, Philip?
I would just say that I believe, I think I'm fair in saying this not only from my position, but my colleagues in the area, we expect growth, and it doesn't have to be acrimonious. It's just we need to help manage the growth and how it's going to happen. I think there's some good aspects of and being in Central Ohio is tremendous. If you like working in a dynamic environment, this is a place to be. But I think with some better collaboration up front, this can be much better down the road. Again, at times it becomes acrimonious because we're not in concert. But I would just ask that we have a seat at the table. We can help work through these issues. And I think we would enhance our product. It would help the educational environment. I think you'd have greater predictability in financial modeling and structures. It would certainly improve the school districts, which are going to help attract. And I think overall, we can also help with just infrastructure in general. It's not only traffic patterns, like we said, but fire safety or fire police, water and sewer. I mean, these things all come together. But again, the bottom line is, again, I think I speak for most of my colleagues in the area to say that we don't mind growth. I mean, it's exciting, it's dynamic, but it needs to be managed in some way so we don't have, tremendous housing opportunities and you have deficient school districts because they're underfunded, or, we've gotten out of pace there. But we're very open. I think many of us think about things entrepreneurially, so it's not as though we're just putting our hands out to say, give us something. I think we want to work in concert, and we want to say, let's work with this employer, like I said before, and say, what do you need this many years, and how can we help, and how does that fit into the housing aspect, and making it attractive when you're trying to grow a business, which again, we know is going to happen. Look at that census data that's around the area. We know another 1 million people by 2030, and I believe 3 million by 2050. So it's going to grow. Let's just work together and manage it.
Anything to build upon there, John?
Well, yes, I think I would like to go back to a point Superintendent Allen made early in the conversation. Because we're, the central focus or central topic of the conversation is, the impact of development, residential development in particular, on the issue of mobility and the impact of mobility on academic, success of our students. And I guess I would just put out there to the developers and the planners that are a part of this conversation that, including us in that conversation so that we can, come up with solutions as Superintendent Allen talked about, to maintain those relationships, because we all know that mobility is a real big issue for those who live in poverty, and another issue for those that live in poverty is trauma. And going through multiple moves is additional trauma on top of any sort of poverty-related trauma that they may already be going through. And if we can somehow work together to address that type of issue through better planning and better collaboration and through better conversations with each other. I mean, we're not expecting the developers and the planners to be social workers. That's not what I'm saying. But if we can be a part of that development conversation, so that then we can have better conversations with the social workers and with those in the community that work on those type of issues, it might have an impact if they don't have to worry about as much about mobility and the additional trauma that comes along with mobility.
Appreciate that. So Kirsten, I'm going to kind of turn back to you and your colleagues at MORPC to see if y'all have any follow-up questions. But before I do that, I just want everybody on the call to hear me say, and I hope John and Diane and Phil will nod their head. The way that I couched this whole discussion and the way that we were just talking about, if there was one thing that we would want to convey to our MORPC partners around including us, I'm certain all of my colleagues would agree there's a lot we could do better too. There's a lot we can do better from our boards into our offices out to you. It's one of the reasons that the ESC made the commitment to be an associate member of MORPC and to try to be engaged in a whole host of these conversations. We need to do a better job of alerting our municipal partners in terms of our strategic initiatives and directions that we want to take our school systems, because that goes to the heart of what it's like to live and work and serve in those communities. And so I don't want that lost in this discussion. Kirsten, is there anything from a MORPC perspective that you want to ask any of the panelists, or are there sort of lingering questions out there that have been posed?
Yes, thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for this really, really good conversation. I know we have still a little bit of time. I have a few questions. I know there are questions that I've gotten from the audience personal to me, and then there are a few in the chat as well. So if you have chance, you can also kind of view the chat. But I think what I forgot to mention at the very beginning is just to recognize that this past year has been incredibly difficult on our school districts. And so I just want to take this opportunity to let you know that we appreciate you. We appreciate your educators and the staff for managing such a hard year. And I guess with that too, my question is, are there any particular community issues that were highlighted or that were made worse during the pandemic, and what were some of your biggest challenges? And I was specifically thinking about one of my friends who is a teacher who was sharing with me that it was very difficult to understand a student's home life during this past year and how to intervene or how to help them out, because they didn't have that daily contact. It was all virtual, things like that. I don't know if one of you would like to start.
I had that in my notes. I think we've yet to see what the impacts of COVID will fully look like in our students and families. It has been difficult in Union County. Access wasn't to, for example, to Wi-Fi was not an issue that was just coupled to students of poverty, because we do have such a rural capacity. That was difficult as well. So we had issues even with kind of high performing students during that time. And I think we'll continue to massage that social emotional impact as we enter into the school year. We were lucky enough to get back to 5 days all in and start to reconnect, and now school's out for summer again. We have over 600 kids enrolled in summer learning opportunities, and the goal was to make it about intervention because that's important, but also just about connection, reconnecting with families, reconnecting with students, reconnecting our community partners with those people as well. So I think that that's like a big onion that's going to continue to peel off as we enter next school year.
Yeah, if I can piggyback on that and say that, you know, especially from a regional and state perspective, you know, the pandemic, and everybody knows this, it's been talked about, you know, for months now. The pandemic just escalated and put, you know, front and center inequities and disparities that are in our society in general. And on that particular issue of access to the internet and broadband, you know, I've been involved in education policy, you know, going on like 25 years now, and having access to broadband was an issue in the early 2000s, and here we are still talking about, you know, especially in rural communities around the state having access. It really broke my heart. You know, when I started hearing and reading stories, you know, down in Southeast Ohio, where kids were still having to deal with packets and not being able to use the internet and using technology because they don't have internet access in that part of the state. And so I think in general, the pandemic, you know, bringing to the forefront the issue of disparities and equities is something that we really should take advantage of, right? What's that old saying? You know, never let a crisis go to waste. You know, and I feel like we're letting the crisis of the pandemic go to waste in terms of addressing disparities and inequities that were brought to the forefront.
Kristen, the only thing I guess that I would add from, I agree with everything that's been said. Probably the hardest thing was leading through this process because the science kept changing. Yeah. You know, and you know, when we first started this, we thought we were closing school for a week. At least I did, and many of us did. So working through that, I think, is difficult because we're not all prepped for that. I think there's been some exposure for some infrastructure, some systems that could be improved because, you know, there'll be future needs, I think. But on the more positive side, I guess the end with this is it's a really enhanced collaboration. I mean, I deal with area people that I hadn't dealt with. I might see them once a year. And so I think there's some things we can learn. We come out of this and we're stronger for it in some respects. And we didn't like it. We don't want it to happen again. But there are some positives that come out of this, like the increased collaboration communication.
Yeah, I guess that's true. With every challenge comes the opportunity for growth and learning. And as hard as some of these pieces were, as you said, there's some good that comes out of it, and hopefully we can learn and you know, be better prepared in the future, but also make things better, faster and more efficiently too. A few other questions that have popped up is about school transportation. That's certainly a big part of your business, so to speak. What are your thoughts about community development and how the way we build our communities and our mobility systems really impacts how students get to work? I think during our prep call, I mentioned it from my own perspective, coming from Germany, how we don't have school bus transportation. You know, we just use the regular public transportation system, or we walk or we bike, because the way our communities are built, it's very walkable, bikeable. Do you have any thoughts about, you know, the transportation system and community development in general, and how it impacts your work?
Philip or John? It's very ironic. Diane's Wi-Fi just kicked her out of the meeting, so she's trying to log back in currently. So Philip or John, you want to take a stab at that?
John, you probably have the biggest, you know, you have the biggest aspect there, transportation. I'll let you jump in. I'm sure my comments will be pale by comparison there, but go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I started to smile when she started the question because, you know, just for the audience, Columbus City Schools, when it's to full capacity, we run over 700 different bus routes, during a regular school year. And, and that's, our fleet is larger than CODA's fleet, and so, transportation is huge. It's a huge issue for Columbus City Schools, but it's also a part of what we have created in Columbus City Schools in terms of our transportation structure. Columbus adopted school choice back in the mid to late 1970s. And so as a result of that, we are transporting students and families to schools that they have chosen to attend, as opposed to locking them into their neighborhood school. So in our school district, transportation is hugely important. And, we have been working with CODA, Central Ohio Transportation Authority, because your question was more along the lines of school bus transportation. But, we have, been in communication with CODA for years on how we might be able to better partner with them to provide rapid transit for our students, but also for our staff, to enable them to have, more access to employment opportunities around the district if transportation is an issue that they must address and deal with. That Central Ohio transportation system is also, we talked about attracting and retaining talent. Having a robust, Central Ohio transportation system with our transportation authority is also, important to attracting and retaining talent, in the region as a whole, because our families need to have access to employment opportunities that may not be located in their neighborhoods. And so the transportation is huge. Just to sum it up, it is huge.
Yeah, and I think that I agree with everything you said. We don't have nearly that scale. We run about 55 buses, but for rural suburban district, that's a lot for us. We travel a lot of miles. But the thing I would add, this is part of the MORPC discussion, though, and planning, though, too, because, it depends on where your facilities are located. A lot of school districts now are clustering, so we're building campuses. I know that's what our model is. So we'll put multiple schools on a site. But that helps with transportation, and deadhead time is something too that you have to think about, like how much is lost is going to pick up kids. But it also, from a MORPC standpoint, gets to the part about how you plan communities, because we can make it more efficient, and for the residents as well too, and it can be more efficient for their wait time and all. I will tell you, since you asked, Kristen, I'll put the plug in. If you know of anyone who is interested in driving a school bus, please send them our way, because we're forever short. Just a little joke, I guess, to inject a little bit of humor in this whole thing. But there was kind of a standard joke about a guy who stopped driving a school bus and went to drive a shale truck when that became popular years ago. And the question was, well, why are you doing that? And he said, well, it's about the same money, about the same hours. I can pick some extra time maybe on a Saturday, but the shale never talks back. So that's kind of the thing to say with it. So I'll put my plug in for school bus drivers, because that's a tough job. But yeah, I think that all leads to the planning discussion, though, too. Now, what we build, but also how residential developments are built out.
Yeah, thank you. Those were great answers. And coming from MORPC, where we're very focused on transportation and mobility planning, we couldn't agree with you more. Dr. Allen, I know you kind of dropped off. We had talked about, you probably picked up on it, the idea of the importance of transportation planning when it comes to school and student busing. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add there.
No, I would also just make a plug. We're hiring as well. I mean, I agree with the parts I got. We just finished the conversation on connectivity and I lost mine. So how ironic would that be? But yes, definitely, it's a really important issue for us as well. Even transportation beyond the school district within our community. We're working on some things and trying to help with that as well. Some of our bus drivers were working in the evenings for someone who bought a kind of a community commuter to make extra money because transportation continues to be a problem for us.
I'm sorry to hear that. So hopefully, yeah, we'll find more drivers for you, or can, better even can fix the transportation system so you don't need them.
Kirsten, I'll add though again too that this is, I think it's so important we talk about these issues, because I would even put that under infrastructure in some respects, because if you see what some of the corporate parks are doing right now, they're developing micro transportation opportunities just to get people shuttle between. John, I know there's people coming from what I'll call the inner ring there in Columbus, and they want to get different places, and there's not direct transportation, and that certainly hinders economic development. I think what they've been doing is kind of these airport shuttles, little mini buses. They've been trying to get some micro transportation in there, but definitely an important topic for all this. Probably could spend a whole hour and a half on that topic alone.
And if I can piggyback onto that, in Columbus City Schools, that development and that planning around transportation is absolutely critical, because I talked about how big our transportation system is. Well, can you imagine that many buses trying to get kids from home to school on time and back from school to home on time, with all the construction that's going on, all the development that's going on, and all of the traffic congestion that's going on. And so, having more mass transit available to get more cars off of the roads, it would definitely be a big plus here in Central Ohio.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And one other thing that just came to mind is it's years ago at Morpsey, we have a program called GoHio, which is really helping match people up for carpooling opportunities. We did something like that with schools, which was called school pooling, to kind of, match parents up to take several kids to a school at the same time. And I think we did that during the year when most of you lost funding for school transportation and had to take pretty drastic measures of saying every kid who lives within a mile or 2 miles of a school will not get school transportation anymore. I don't think we have that program anymore, but it might be something worth looking at again and see if that could evolve, just as a side note.
Oh, and by the way, we're looking for drivers also.
All right, we'll post a notice here soon. All right, one more question, and then I have a final question, and I'll let Tom kind of wrap up. So there's actually two questions that I got from two separate people. One was posted in the link in the chat that talked about regarding collaboration. Have any of the speakers or districts ever attended a meeting or written a letter of support regarding a potential residential development? Dr. Wagner has answered that and said, yes, strategically they have, but ideally, I think your answer would be, or what I've heard is, can you be part of the conversation early on before the development even is on the books? But also, and you can answer that question as well as another one that's related to development that came in, is how, if at all, do you coordinate with the municipalities on decisions around developer incentives, such as tax abatements and commercial development in general?
Kirsten, I'll start since I responded in the chat. We've had two situations I can tell you about, both different. We had a situation years ago where the developer was coming in and was going to put one, basically a PUD type of development, and they were going to put a apartment complex in the part of that development, and maybe two. And it was contentious, and we ended up very challenging 9 months of discussion with the developer. And at the end, the developer said, what do you want? And I said, we need an improved housing stock. And I said, nothing against apartments or dense living. We have plenty of that available in the school district now. So long and short of it, that's the development I referenced earlier when I said they're building houses in the high 300s, low $400,000 range. And we met with them a year after they decided not to put the apartment complex in. And they were thrilled, from a business standpoint, the business model was going well. So I think that was an opportunity. It started a little rough, but ended strong, and now they're into 5 phases of that development, and we have not objected to anything. But again, we know exactly what's happening. We know there's some patio homes in there that are kind of tailored more to the 55 and older, but we've done studies on all that. So that's a very good success story. We had another developer that was coming in. This is a more recent one, about a year ago, and met with them. And it's hard for me to support developers, but I certainly didn't throw up any roadblocks because of our funding, school funding shortages that we have. But what we agreed to there was that they had some common area, and they were going to donate 10 acres of their project to us for a future bus garage. So that was a win-win for us. Unfortunately, the deal has fallen through since. There's been things outside of our school district and the developer that, they're restarting the process. But that was one that we were kind of neutral to a little positive on, again, because of the school funding model and the challenges. But I think it can be done. Again, I'm just going to underscore its relationships, its collaboration, it's working together.
Yeah, if I could add on, I think for so long, that issue and that topic has been painted as a them against us type of framework, as opposed to, as Superintendent Wagner is describing, a partnership and a collaboration to do what's best for the entire community, right? And making sure that, going back to Superintendent Wagner's point about creating opportunities for our students and families that may not have been available without those type of collaborative conversations and partnerships. In the last few years, we've been able to partner with the city and partner with developers, especially around economic development and sort of commercial development, to create other opportunities for our students, like internships, shadowing opportunities, opportunities to have more computers and technology, to have mentorship opportunities. And so, again, without having the opportunity to be on the front end and think creatively and think and brainstorm and be forward thinking, those opportunities are lost. And then it becomes a conversation about, about what's there and what's not there, as opposed to the possibilities.
Thank you. We are almost there, 4 minutes left. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tom, but I just want to thank you for your time. I know you have a lot on your plates right now as you're gearing up for the next year. I'd be interested to hear what might be new for this fall. But with only 4 minutes left, I want to give Tom the opportunity to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. First of all, thanks to my colleagues for taking the time today. This was a big commitment. There's a lot going on. I know folks may think, well, school's out for the summer, right? This is actually probably one of the busiest times of the year for my colleagues. So much appreciated for your time. Most importantly, though, just on a personal level, thank you for all that you do. I want the MORPC members to hear this directly from me. I know that you all have complex jobs and are leading organizations to provide services to your communities. And whether it's been the pandemic or any of the other issues that are happening culturally right now, you're all facing headwinds and cross currents locally, regionally, certainly in our state. But I think we can all agree that all of these issues, the pandemic, issues of equity and social justice, come home to roost in your neighborhood school. That's really where this plays out. And our teachers on the front line and our support personnel, including the school bus drivers that we so desperately need, but certainly the school superintendents, district leadership teams, and school boards are squarely in the midst of all of these issues. And we have an embarrassment of riches in Central Ohio. We have such a talented school leadership caucus, I would say, right now. Very, very capable, strong, experienced leaders. We've got a couple of new superintendents coming in to both Hilliard and to Bexley. I may be missing one, Delaware Area Career Center as well. But I'm just really proud to be affiliated and associated with them, both on a personal level and certainly on a professional level. Kirsten, the last thing I'll say is, my aim from the start of this, I think, is your aim and MORPC members' aim, whether it's this call or any other future discussions about this or anything else. The education community wants stronger collaboration with MORPC members and our regional partners. We want to be included to show another unique aspect or another unique perspective to the conversations that you're having with your members. And we'll be very transparent and forthright every time about what we're about and what we're trying to achieve so that we can approach these things in a more coordinated and harmonious fashion. So thank you again, everyone.
Wonderful, thank you. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. We'll send you more information about our next Regional Housing Speaker Series and the peer exchange. And thank you to all of you again for your time today and your wisdom. Bye.
Thank you, Kirsten. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.